Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and you listeners know how much throughout the course of 2025, I've really been hammering home the point that we can't just be entrepreneurs. We can't just think like builders. We also have to think like executives. We also have to step into that true CEO role in our businesses, and that's why I absolutely know that you're going to love today's guest, because not only does he force people to step into that CEO role, but really everything I saw about the way that this guy operates, he just asks such big questions that lead you to even bigger answers. And I know that he's going to reshape the way you think about not only your business, but your function inside of your business. So let me introduce you to today's guest. His name is Justin Wilhelms. Justin operates as a fractional CEO, where he works with small business owners that have grown a successful business, but hit that first plateau. Yes, it happens in every single person's business. They're realizing how limited they are as to how much further they can grow because they're still in each lane of the business. So if that's you, don't worry, you're not alone. Justin's going to dispel so much of that here in today's episode. Justin focuses on determining what the people of the organization get energy from as it relates to the different stage of workflow, and he uses a really interesting assessment called the Working Genius Assessment to help identify that. We're definitely going to get some insights from him on that. They then look at the foundational processes of the business to determine if they're scalable. And then Justin loves asking the big question of, if your business were to 100x what it is today, is the way to conduct business still able to operate to support things at that size? They then work to improve efficiency, reduce redundancy, and automate where possible. So all of us are in for a treat today to learn from him. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Justin Wilhelms. All right, Justin, I am so very excited that you're here with us today. First things first, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on here, and I'm looking forward to talking to you.
Heck yes. I'm excited to get into your mind because obviously I bragged a little bit about what you're up to today, but you have an awesome story even leading up to it. So let's start there. Let's start with you yourself. Take us beyond the bio. Who's Justin? How'd you start doing all these cool things?
Well, it's been awesome because I've had an opportunity to work in a lot of lanes in the marketplace, in different industries and stuff like that. The main area that I really helped grow a business was the last opportunity I was in. Joined the water treatment space about 14 years ago with an awesome owner who had built a good business and just helped him expand it. It was a lot of fun to be able to work with him and be able to work with the team and grow that industry space. And through that, I got a chance to network with a lot of other owners and a lot of other people that really we're doing the same thing in different areas of the country. And because of the way that I look at people and see the value of having a good built organization, it gave me a chance to really talk to a lot of those other people and help even other people grow outside of the company that we were building.
Yeah, I love that. And of course, a lot of that alludes to so much of what we're going to talk about today, which is that CEO role inside of any business. You've seen it across so many different businesses in your professional career. And obviously, of course, through the work that you do today, you see and invite others to step into that CEO role. What does CEO mean to you? Because we throw that term around so frequently. Just go on Instagram and everyone's going to have entrepreneur or CEO in their bio, which doesn't mean that they are operating on that level. What's it actually mean to you?
I like the term that I've heard people use, managing director, because really they're the ones that are overseeing a lot of the operational side of the business. Like you hear CEO, and then there's also CFO, CIO, and they're a little bit more specific, but the CEO kind of has their hand in everything, which is why a lot of owners that are trying to fill that role feel like they're obligated to do all the things. And so the CEO really creates the foundation for a business to be able to grow and thrive. And they're really one of the main people responsible for keeping the culture aligned with what the mission is of that organization.
Yeah, and when we hear you say those things, Justin, I can only think back to what my early 20s self would have thought hearing you say that of, it sounds like it's a different function. Whereas a lot of us, when we start our businesses, CEO is the everything function. To me, hearing the way you talk about this, and obviously I've seen so much of your language and messaging about this, it seems like that the CEO is a function in and of itself. What does that function look like on the day-to-day? So many of us entrepreneurs, we are blinded. I'll use that verb. We're blinded by passion and we want to do the work. We're overwilling to do the work. And so it makes a lot of us practitioners in our businesses. How's that differ from the CEO function?
So when a good CEO sits in the right seat, they're really the problem solver. They're the ones looking at, okay, what areas of the business need to be redefined, or maybe need to be looked at with a different lens. And so they're the ones that usually are thinking of the new ideas, trying to help develop an action plan of what it looks like to be able to recraft or reshape something that's getting stuck or broken. They're also very much over the people of the organization and realizing, do we have the right people in the right seats? Are they operating at their highest level because we're working with their genius and where they get energy from and where they really focus on the tasks that we've given them? Are they the right person for that? Or do we have to think differently? And so a good CEO is able to kind of read between the lines and see the big picture and then really zoom in and be able to see, do we have the right things in the right spot?
Yeah. All right. You brought up the word working in your genius. So I'm going to go straight to the working genius assessment. I think it's such a cool part of your work. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. The working genius is just it's an awesome tool. It's a productivity tool. And I think a lot of people, when they hear assessment, they're always thinking strengths and weaknesses and personality traits. And this is very different from that. In the last business that I was in, I got introduced to it at a point where I was starting to get burned out and I was starting to feel stuck. And took the assessment, had our team take the assessment, and really had a big eye-opener realizing that my areas of genius are really inventing and discerning on parts of the business. So to kind of back up, the working genius, it breaks workflow down into 6 segments. Wonder, which is kind of the pie in the sky idea. Invention is the tactical ideas that come from the wonder that you're sitting on. Discernment is the next lane, which is really where you take those ideas and start to create a plan and actually look at what it takes to execute that plan. Galvanizing is then once the plan is developed, you actually have to have a cheerleader, somebody who's going to get everybody excited about it, get everything moving in the right direction. And then that moves into enablement. Enablement is basically the checklist. So the people that are actually doing the work, implementing the new idea, implementing the change, or rolling out a new process. And then tenacity is the person who crosses the T's, dots the I's, puts a bow on it, makes sure it's complete. And when I first took the assessment, I was ID, invention and discernment, and galvanizing was one of my competencies. And when I started to take a different look at our business, I had moved into, because of how big we had grown, the galvanizer. I was doing that 80% of the time. And I realized that was starting to burn me out. And it was because even though I was really good at it, which is a strength, right? I developed that skill really well. I could walk into a room and motivate just about anybody. It didn't fill my cup. So when you talk about working genius, what are the 2 lanes of workflow that you get energy from? Meaning you could do them for endless amounts of time and really not get tired. And so when we use that with my clients now, they start to re-identify what lanes does the owner belong in. And the biggest thing to remember is you only have 2. Nobody has all 6 as a genius. You have 2. So there's a lot of lanes of workflow, and most owners are in all of them. And then we start to realize why certain parts are getting bogged down. When you figure that out, it's really a game changer on how you delegate and how you start to elevate your team into different areas of the business. And that's where efficiency comes from.
Justin, it's so interesting hearing the way you very intentionally talk about these things, because I feel like you're bringing up an important balance that we all need to face, not only in our businesses, but for sure in our lives. I frequently use that phrase, that I love this phrase in English, of a blessing and a curse. How many things are both a blessing and a curse? And you just alluded to one of those things, that you're good at certain types of work, you're good at galvanizing, but just because you're good at it doesn't mean that it's what you're meant to do. It doesn't mean that it's what gives you energy. Clearly, you care about energy levels and you pay attention to that, because that's one solid indicator of if we're on the right path or not. I could podcast for days like that. That's why we're a 7-day-a-week podcast, because this is genuinely what I love to do. It gives me energy. But at the same time, as entrepreneurs and founders, we're so good at so many different things. We want and we're willing to do all of those things. How much of executive leadership, how much of that CEO function is about us sticking to our lane? I guess that's the way I'm going to phrase it right now, versus saying, hey, I'm going to plug some holes. I'm going to be that team player. I'm going to take one for the team and do what needs to be done to move this business forward. Is it things we should develop? Is it things we should just say, no, I'm going to stick to my lane and have others fill it? How the heck do we navigate this balance?
Yeah, a lot of people, they see their frustration and they're like, okay, I'm going to work on making that better. I'm going to tell you that's a waste of your time, because that's going to frustrate you no matter how good you get at that skill set. So when I realized that I was doing all the galvanizing, we started to shift And we actually hired a COO we intentionally looked for a galvanizer. We found one, and he was able to really take on that load. And it allowed me to get back into the lane that I belong. And it re-energized me for what I was doing. And the burnout really started to go away. And so when you start to look at your frustrations, that's a hiring point. So do you have somebody on the team now that has those as their genius? If you don't, and you're in need of expansion, we're going to very intentionally hire for those skill sets. We're going to hire for those geniuses and make sure that when we add new people to the organization, we're bringing the people in that we have holes right now. I had a client that the whole team is WI and ET. So they didn't have anybody that naturally wanted to do or got energy from discernment, got energy from galvanizing. So they were coming up with new ideas and forcing them in the organization and always tripping over them because they didn't actually go through the process of breaking it down, creating a plan that was actionable and getting everybody to understand the why behind it. And so that's where, okay, our next step is we have to intentionally look at that. And between now and when we get to that finish line, we're going to start to look at who's competent in those areas and share that workload. Because if you're competent in that area, you can do it for a period of time. You shouldn't be doing it the majority, but you can spend more time than somebody who has a frustration in that area. And so I use a breakdown of 60-30-10. 60% of your time or more should be in your lanes of genius. 30% or less should be in your lanes of competency. And you should be focusing to spend less than 10% of your time in your frustration. If you can balance that out, you're going to be more energized throughout the week to be able to be more effective. And when you're getting energy from what you're doing, you're way more efficient. You're way more productive. You don't make mistakes. Profits go up. You're getting more work done in less time. And so it's just a good way to look at it as to how you craft who does what as everything flows through the business.
Justin, hearing you talk about these things, though, I feel like you're revealing one of your secrets to success, which is awareness. Because when you talk about 60-30-10, I would imagine a lot of listeners are thinking, Justin, I'm not tracking my time. How am I going to know what percent of my time I'm spending in all of these? Obviously, the more data we have, the more strategic we can be in our decision making. Awareness is step one to obviously obtaining that data and amassing that data. Is that something that you recommend all of us do in our businesses? Should we be time tracking? How can we get that level of awareness that you bring to the table and for your clients?
I love the term awareness because it's so critical in everything that you do. So let's talk about meetings. Meetings are a waste of time if you don't go in with a plan. And so before you start a meeting, what's the meeting's purpose? Be aware of its intent, and then be aware of which lane it's in from the workflow. Are we entering a meeting that's an idea meeting? Well, then we shouldn't bring the enablers to that meeting because they're going to get exhausted by being involved in that meeting. And so let's be focused with the right people in that discussion because we're aware of where we are in the process of execution, right? And so when you actually look at the genius as a filter, I would say everything that a business owner does, if you filter it through the working genius, you're aware of what lane you're in, so you're aware of who you should have involved in it, and then you can be intentional with the time. And so then, by proxy, your time management becomes an automatic thing because you're not necessarily having to track how much time you're spending in each lane. You're being intentional on pushing the right people into the discussion when it's in their lane of genius, and you're intentional about excluding people from the discussion when it's their lane of frustration. I had a client that is an insurance agency, and he's a very inclusive owner. He's an awesome dude, a lot of energy. And he has two people on his team that are ETs, very much enabler, tenacity. They are the worker bees. Give them the plan. They will execute it. And you don't have to think about it, right? He really wanted to include everybody in the organization in every discussion and every meeting. And so there were a lot of idea meetings. And those people did not get anything from it. They were actually more tired leaving it and made them less productive after the fact. And when we were sitting down as a team, we brought that to the table, and I went, so how do you guys feel about being in those meetings? And they're like, we hate being there. We think it's a waste of time. And the owner was like, but I want to include you guys. And they're like, we're okay being excluded. And it was such an eye-opener of know your people at that level, and they're going to appreciate when you leave them out in an area they don't want to be in anyway. And so that's where your awareness comes in, and it makes that balance much more effective kind of automatically.
Yeah, I love these real life client examples. It's so cool that you can bring these to the table because we all view examples through our own lens and we put ourselves into those stories. And I can see in you sharing that most recent example about how many times we as the leaders of our businesses think we're doing the right thing. It's good hearted, but again, that skill of awareness, having that awareness, developing that awareness, realizing, hey, maybe the right thing is exclusion. It sounds counterintuitive, but it's the best leadership that we can do, which introduces to, you brought up like personality tests earlier. And I feel like when we take the Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTP, and when I read it, I'm just like, yep, nailed, totally. That's 100% exactly what my personality type. So much of personality assessments are about, this is naturally who you are. This is how you were made. This is how you show up in the world. Versus on the skill side, those are things that we can develop. Those are things we can learn. Most importantly, those are things we can practice. Awareness, I would argue, is something that we can practice. How much of your work, when you look at that executive function, is about, hey, let's understand who you are and how you are, versus, and I don't even know if you view it as versus or if these work in tandem, versus, hey, these are skills. Let's work on these skills. Let's up your game so that you can fulfill the CEO role in your business.
Yeah, I would say the people is number 1, 2, and 3. Like I'm more focused on the people of the organization, how people tick, not only how you need to deliver information to be effective as a leader, but way more important than that is understanding how your people best receive information. I'll tell you from a culture standpoint, if you can understand how your people receive information the best, what areas they get energy from, and you can tie that together, it's a massive impact. People feel way more included and way more appreciated when you really leverage that skill set. And really that goes down to servant leadership, which is a huge piece of who I am and who I help a lot of the owners I work with become. Because when you are serving your people, that's leading, right? You're not telling them what to do. You're not forcing people to do something different. You're literally going, where can I help lift you up? Where are you in need of a different training module or support in this area? Or do we need to hire somebody to be able to help fill a gap because you're overloaded? And when you start to think about it from that perspective, you can see the world through their lens, which honestly, when I start with a client, that's my goal, is I want to sit down with them and I need to pick your brain until I can see your world through your lens, the way you view it. Now I can determine, first, am I even the right fit for working with you? Am I a good fractional CEO for your business based on who you are and what you're aimed at? And second, I can make the recommendations that align with your values, align with your focus, align with your vision for your 3, 5, 10-year plan, what your exit strategy looks like, what the long-term goals are for the business, so that we can actually stay focused on an actual heading that aligns with your mission, aligns with your vision, and what's truly important to you.
Justin, I'm so glad that you're leading us down this path, because this is one area that I've been so excited to go into with you. We've had fractional CFOs on the show before. We've had fractional CMOs on the show before, COOs. All of these things are very popular. I don't think a lot of business owners recognize, hey, there are fractional CEOs out there that I'm the owner, but I want to go step by step, hand in hand with someone who understands this function to help us get to a certain point, to get over that first plateau that I teased at the very top of today's episode. What does it look like to work with someone like you? What's it look like to have a fractional CEO step into our businesses?
Yeah, so basically I become kind of an extension of the business, but in more of a part-time capacity, which is why it's more of a fractional relationship. But basically, when I sit down with the owner, I come in, we sit down, 90 minutes, we get out of the business. We're going to work on it. So we're going to get out of the weeds, out of the detailed stuff, really at a high level. What areas of the business need attention today because they're causing us to get stuck? There's issues that we're finding on a regular basis, and one of the clients, a lot of accounting issues, a lot of mistakes on what that looked like from invoices that were not getting done properly. And when you take a step back, it wasn't that the person was doing a bad job. It was that there was an SOP, but then there were 13 other SOPs behind it. And when you're doing a particular part of the business a different way for this client, a different way for that client, a different way over here, you're going to have issues. And so my job is to sit down and take what's on fire and dig deeper and find the actual root cause of the problem. And once we get there, then we start to figure out what the next step is. By the end of the 90 minutes, we've identified what the high-level items are that need attention and a good tactical list of to-dos that owner can actually handle between now and the next time we get together. And then my job is to hold them accountable, make sure that I kind of keep a pulse on things and that they're making progress in the right direction. In between our meetings, usually it's either once a week or every other week. I'm a phone call away. They call me if there's something that comes on fire they're not sure what to do with, and I'm a sounding board. A lot of these owners are really good in their craft. That's why they opened a business. And as it got bigger, they realized they didn't know how to actually build the foundation that stands on as they have people and as they have a larger client list. And they're starting to actually get some decent revenue coming in. But they haven't quite got big enough. That's why I call it that first plateau. They haven't got big enough to afford that $250,000, $300,000 salary as a full-time CEO coming in. And there isn't 40 hours of work for that CEO to do, so they're not there yet. And so my job is to help them get through that period to the point where they are big enough. Now they can start to build out an executive team, bring in a CEO, bring in a CFO. And what's great is I've got partners that are fractional CFOs and fractional CMOs, and I'll bring them in for specific segmented parts of the business as we're working on the foundation.
Yeah, I love that. Justin, especially just having seen as much of your work as I have, you talk so frequently about those plateaus, and the former math tutor in me, I talk about inflection points, all talking about the same topics, but there are so many of those. There's those that come at the very beginning of our journeys. There's those that come when we have our first 6 figures, first 7 figures, multiple 7 figures. There's so many different plateaus and inflection points. Share some of those real world ones with us, because a lot of people can relate to the feeling of running into a wall without necessarily seeing or recognizing what exactly that wall is and the way to get past it, because they haven't experienced that plateau before. It's exactly why it is a plateau.
The two main things that I think identify it are, one, you are struggling to hold everybody accountable because the team's gotten big enough that you don't have the bandwidth to be able to keep a good pulse on each of the people because you're still doing too many things in the business. But it's a large enough business that there's a lot of things moving and shaking. You're late in the office every night because the only times that you've got to be able to breathe is 6 till 9 o'clock at night or on Saturdays when there's nobody in the office. And an owner, really, that's not what they signed up for, right? They signed up for a life that they thought was going to give them freedom. They're going to build a team underneath them that are going to do the work. But if they step away, the business kind of pauses. And it's like, whoa, that is not what is meant to happen. And so that first plateau is where the owner is still necessary for the business to move forward. And that's not going to be a good long-term plan. And you can't carry all that weight as an owner. And so starting to figure out how to delegate better and build out the process so that things are a little bit more automatic, things streamline into each other. So there's less manual labor. If you're constantly having to manual lift everything that goes on in the business, you can't get that big. You can only do that for so long. And honestly, there's some people that's all they want, and that's fine. And the work that I do probably isn't applicable to them. But the people that do want to get to that point where the business kind of runs itself, we start to figure out what those holes are or gaps, and how do we start to let things go. Back to the genius side, a lot of owners just feel like they have to have their finger on anything. Guess what? You hired good people for a reason. Let them do what they're good at, and you don't need to be touching it. And if you can't do that, you may not have hired the right people. So we have to reevaluate that too.
Yeah. Justin, it leads right into the question. You've talked about scalability a few times in our conversation today, and it's the question that I teased at the very top of today's episode because I think it's such a brilliant way you go about your work, and that is the bigger questions you ask, the bigger answers you find. If you and I got together today and in person in a coffee shop, we were sitting there saying, gosh, how can we make $50 today? We're going to find a $50 answer. Whereas if you and I sat there and we said, how can we make $5 million today? We're going to find much bigger answers. You ask of your clients that big question of, if your business was to 100x what it is today, what's that going to look like? What does that exercise look like? Do people rise to the level of that question? Is it something you have to coach them through and invite them to think bigger? Because I think we don't frequently do that in life or business.
It honestly, the one word I end up sounding like a 2-year-old when I'm meeting with them, but it's intentional, is why. So whatever the first answer is, okay, why is that your vision? Why is that your limit? Why not 5 times that or 10 times that or even bigger than that? And then all of that starts to identify, do they actually have a mission and vision that they live and breathe inside the office. Most of the time, I walk in, and when I ask, what's your mission, what's your vision? I either get one of two answers. No, I don't really have one, which is a problem. We have to fix that. Or it's over there on the wall. Well, can you recite it to me? Well, not really. Okay, so it's not living and breathing. So when you start to do that, now we can actually look at, okay, in 5 years, if we're aligned with our mission and vision, based on the growth rates that are achievable in this industry, here's where we should be getting. And all of a sudden it's like, that's realistic? Well, yeah, it's realistic. But the problem is we've got processes right now that'll prevent you from getting there because things are clunky. Things are slowing you down. People are inefficient, ineffective. You don't have a good accountability system. You're not keeping a good pulse on what's going on in your CRM. And all of those things start to surface as to these are our limiting factors that are going to prevent you from actually fulfilling that true mission vision. So at the beginning, honestly, that's one of the biggest things we work on is mission vision statement, because you have to have that as a filter to be able to make decisions on, okay, does this align with where we're headed? If it does, now we start working on the invention, the discernment, the galvanizing, and getting it into play. Or no, that actually doesn't align at all. Sounds like a great idea, but it doesn't align with where we're headed. You don't even talk about it. That's efficient. Now you've moved it off the table versus a lot of times that gets vetted for 2, 3, 4 weeks until finally somebody goes, yeah, this doesn't feel right. And then we'll move on. You just wasted a month, right? So the mission vision, that's the critical part. That's where the big picture can actually get high definition. You can actually look at it, see it, feel it, breathe it. It becomes part of the goals of the business and everybody's pulling on the rope in the same direction.
Yeah, which also loops back fully. It's a full circle moment towards the very beginning of our conversation when I asked you about the function of the CEO. And part of your answer there was the CEO has to help people move in the direction of your mission and your vision. So I love the fact that you're calling it out here again towards the end of our conversation is you can't do that if you don't have that mission or vision. And it's such intentional work that comes back to the awareness, comes back to your genius, comes back to so many of the things we've talked about today, all tying into it's big stuff that we have to work on as CEOs inside of our businesses, but we have to carve out the time because if we don't, time doesn't make itself. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day stuff. So Justin, truth be told, these episodes always fly by for me because we have amazing entrepreneurs on the show that I just want to talk to for hours and hours. But of course, we can't do that here on the podcast airwaves. We'll lose some listeners. So I always ask this broad question at the end of every episode because it's totally up to you what direction you take it in. And I know you're going to drop some serious value for our listeners. And that is, what's your best piece of advice for listeners? Knowing that we're being listened to by both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at all different stages of not only their business journeys, but their journeys of stepping into the CEO role, and also knowing that you're one of us, you're a fellow entrepreneur. What's that one piece of advice that you want to leave them with today?
If your main underlying purpose allows you to make all of your decisions through it, what I call it is knowing your why. If you know why you do what you do, why your goals are what they are, why your business exists, it's so much easier to feel proud of the decisions that you make. You know when to say no and make that a complete sentence. And you know when to put all of your energies into something because you're really fulfilling a purpose that you're meant to live. What is your goal? Like my why is I really love helping other people make their lives better. That's why I do what I do. So my entire focus is when I walk into a business, what do I have the ability to do in this organization to make everybody that's here in a better position tomorrow and a better position next week? And that's why I do what I do. So if you know your why, everything that you do can be leaned into that and you feel really happy about what you're doing. It's work becomes fun again because you're focused on the purpose that you're meant to be on this earth. Like God gave me that gift. God gave me that focus. And that's why I do what I do. So know your why and live your entire life through that. It's a great book, Start With Why, that I read years ago. And it really helped me stay aligned in the things that I do and how I go about approaching and supporting people and how I run my business and my family. Is everything comes back to that why.
Yes, so well said. And Justin, I would actually argue decision making becomes so much easier when you lean on that why, because you'll always know what that North Star is. It's really hard for you and I to get where it is that we want to go if we don't have a destination in the GPS. And so it's really cool to see how much that influences the way you run your business, the way that you live your life, and of course, the way that you help so many other people with your business. So I'm going to use that as a natural segue to kick things back to you to drop some links on us, because I'm really excited for listeners to see your work in action. Obviously, they've heard from you today, they've heard our conversation, but I will say, as someone from the outside looking in on your business, I love your messaging. I love how much you invite us to think bigger, how much you invite us to step into that role. The headline on your website says, bringing freedom to you in your business. And that's something that when we talk about entrepreneurial wise, freedom is such a big part of it. And you help people get out of those day-to-day shackles, start leading with that clarity. So Justin, a little bit of a tease from me, but drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here?
So my website is jwicfreedom.com. And then I'm very active on LinkedIn, regularly connecting with people. Justin Wilhelms, you can find me on there. JW Innovative Coaching, I've got a business landing page, but on my personal page is where I spend most of my time putting content out and just trying to do what I can to share my thoughts in leadership and how to build a business. And then I throw a lot of stuff on there about my personal life, fitness and hunting and everything else that I do. It's just a lot of fun just to keep things well-rounded.
Yes, and I'm so appreciative of the way that you show up as yourself for others, Justin. It's so cool to see that you practice what you preach. And I think in so many cases, that's inspiring for all of us to start doing the same. So listeners, don't worry. You don't have to go hunting for any of those links. You can find all of those links down below in the show notes, no matter where it is that you're tuning into today's episode, whether you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or if you're one of those few people who are tuning into us on YouTube to watch Justin and I faces on camera having this conversation. Check the show notes out and you can click through to Justin's website, his personal LinkedIn. Don't be shy on any of those platforms. Otherwise, Justin, on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Brian. It's been an honor and a pleasure.